Hello and welcome to PSP Classics. In this installment, I'm talking about Final Fantasy III, first released in 1990 by Squaresoft for the Famicom. Although an NES version was planned, it was never actually released, as Square was a very small developer back then, and in 1990, when the year that Final Fantasy III was released for the Famicom, the NES first saw the original Final Fantasy, and that meant that they were several years behind. Therefore, Final Fantasy III, had it been released, probably would have been released around 1992, a year when the Super Nintendo was now in full bloom. So, in 1991, Square decided to shift efforts from translating Final Fantasy II to bringing the Final Fantasy IV, which had just come out for the Super Famicom in Japan, and bringing that out as Final Fantasy II. Therefore, Final Fantasy II and the real Final Fantasy III got sidetracked, and these games never were released up until 2006, when they were finally re-released as Final Fantasy III for the Nintendo DS. The DS version of the game was largely seen as a huge success, and was introduced, gamers to this long-lost Final Fantasy entry. However, this creates a big confusion in a lot of retro gamers, because when Final Fantasy VI was released for the Super NES, it was renamed Final Fantasy III, and that was Final Fantasy III for a whole generation of gamers. And so, when this version came out, people confused this and said, hey look, it's Final Fantasy III, therefore this is the awesome title that we knew for the Super Nintendo. No, this is actually the real Final Fantasy III, and you've never played this game before. Alright, so let's get right into this. This PSP release was released in 2012 exclusively in Japan. Now, however, even though it's a Japanese exclusive release, it looks what language you have your PSP language settings to. So if you have an English PSP, this game will be in English. You don't have to worry about it being in Japanese if you don't read Japanese. Of course, it's a fantastic game, and this was the first Final Fantasy game to introduce the job system. The job system allows your cast of characters to assume different roles of battle, so they don't have to be the same character classes for every battle. Different character classes have different skill sets and different abilities, so you want to try and mix and match parties to get different attributes together. Of course, this is an epic RPG, that has a whole bunch of Final Fantasy staples, such as, your flying ship, battles, random battles, all sorts of different things that you normally expect from an FF game. The world is massive, there's a lot to see and do. And although it was released on the DS originally, this PSP release uses the DS visuals and doesn't actually use, what the PSP is truly capable of visually. However, this is not really that bad of a thing, because the game does look still fantastic, and it's got a number of things going on for it. Looks like I gotta go this way. The only real detriment about the PSP release is that the load times, are a bit long, considering it has to read from the UMD. Let's see, where is this? Whoops, I went past it. This game was also released on Android, but something that this game offers that the original Android and the original DS version do not, is you can go into the configuration here, and you can switch between a rearranged BGM to the original. The original background music, you know, which is the chiptune from the Famicom, actually sounds better than what the real Famicom can do. They have this like stereo effect that's not possible on the original Famicom, and this makes the game sound fantastic. Man, it's just so much better. I have the actual original Famicom cart, and even compared to, you know, the real thing running on the real hardware, this is just so damn good. It's good to listen to. Final Fantasy III was an extremely impressive Famicom game when it was released in 1991, or 1990 I should say, you know, as one of the last real efforts on the Famicom. And on the PSP here, this, you know, doesn't really strike you as that visually impressive, or really that impressive, especially on a system that's, you know, drowned out with so many RPGs. Even with that said, though, this is still a fantastic game to play through, and it's, you know, just really stands the test of time as, you know, a classic RPG that works excellent on the PSP. And once again, you can, at any point in time, you can go to the configuration menu, change the music. I personally think that both the arranged soundtrack and the original soundtracks are both fantastic, so, you know, choosing which one you like more is really just down to personal preference. This is such a beautiful game, and, you know, no matter what kind of music that you will go through, it's just fantastic. The storyline is nothing to write home about. You know, it's pretty typical fantasy fare, especially for Final Fantasy. Over the years, Final Fantasy plots would get better and better, but Final Fantasy III, you know, the early Final Fantasy games didn't really have that great of a plot. It wouldn't be until 4 that the plots really were starting to get interesting. If you have played the original Final Fantasy III, this will really come as quite a shock to see, you know, a game that you know, are familiar with, to see it in such an unfamiliar fashion. FF3 was also the first Final Fantasy game to really switch up the battle system so that if all your party members target the same enemy, they don't waste their turn after you defeat an enemy. This seems like, you know, no-brainer nowadays for RPGs, but back in the day, this was something that was brand new. There's also the auto battle mode, which allows you to simply press select, and therefore you can go into a battle and have it really proceed at its own pace, and it's super fast. This makes grinding, you know, something that's required in this game to be so much more tolerable. Within seconds you can, you know, level up, and it's just awesome. Also, the new job system introduced in FF3 allows your characters to change from anything from like a knight to a thief, dragoon, Viking, you know, to your simple things like a monk, or you can be a white mage or a black mage, all these different options. And mixing and matching your party is something that you will do constantly throughout the course of the game. You'll never want to stay with the same classes for too long. And there's just so much to see and do in this game. Anyway, thanks for watching guys. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you next time.